So today, my name's Wes Wright, by the way. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Sutter Health. I've got my team here with me that helped us move to Office 365. My job is easy. All I'm doing is explaining what we're going to talk about today. Oftentimes, you'll hear a CTO like myself say something like, you know, it was a team effort. It's a great team effort. Without the team, couldn't have made this happen. Instead today, what we're going to do is I'm going to do the welcome and introductions. Then Monica is going to talk about the brilliant ideas that I had in driving adoption of Office 365. Then Jay's going to talk about the brilliant ways I organized our workforce to implement Office 365. Jim's going to tell you about some of the technical problems and issues that we came across while implementing Office 365. Mostly Jim made the errors. Mine were brilliant, of course. So that's, and then I've got three guys down here at the front, Nick, Pete, and Marcus, that were actually the engineers who engineered the solution and did the work. Figured we get a lot of questions in here from folks about how things really work. I didn't want to give up any more brilliant ideas, so these guys are doing that for us. So a little bit about Sutter Health. As you can, I'll let you read this slide. Have about 12,000 physicians. Those numbers are actually small. Really have about 70,000 users. You'll hear the team reference the number 70,000. And most often, unlike what I just did, we will call them clinical and business partners and not users, which I just did because users belong to crack dealers. So we do about $12 billion in revenue every year. You can see the footprint that we cover there. Notice I've got this thing out in Hawaii. It never breaks. Nothing ever breaks in Hawaii. Never have an opportunity to go to Hawaii. But that's how far our organization spans. We're mostly concentrated in the middle of Northern California. When we do our work, our vision is to make technology transparent to our clinical and business partners. We do that through and this might sound familiar, strategy of virtual, cloud, and mobile first. And our work is based on the principles of QS4. And we did this up front because everything that they did or will explain kind of was in this work methodology. So QS4, quality's at the top. It's supported by stability in this order. You have to make your apps stable, you got to make them secure, and you got to make them fast. Not just fast compute, but fast to market. You got to have that agility. And I think that's the best story that we have to tell today is how fast we got our folks to market. And then, of course, it's all built on a foundation of simplicity, because the simpler you can make things, the more stable you can make them, the more secure you can make them, and the faster you can make them. Oh, this one now. So why did we choose Microsoft? It was about probably around 2 years ago that we made this decision. At the time, Microsoft was the only one that would even negotiate with us on a BAA. So that was one thing. Where Satya and his team were going from a Microsoft flight plan, I'm Air Force, we don't do roadmaps, we do flight plans. So from a flight plan perspective, we found that our goals aligned pretty well with where Microsoft was going. And then I used to be the CIO and CTO at Seattle Children's for a while, for about 7 years, so I had developed a lot of relationships with the Microsoft people. So combining all that is where and why we decided to go with Microsoft. Now I'm going to turn it over to Monica. Notice the nice shoes and my Seahawks shoes too. Did you turn it on?
Glad we coordinated with the shoes.
Turn your mic on.
My mic's on. The green light is on.
Okay, that's Monica.
Is there a volume?
No? Can you hear her?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Okay, go.
Yeah? Okay. So thanks, Wes. We're really excited to be here today and talking to all of you a little bit about our program so you can hear how our deployment helped our clinical and business partners feel like they were done with versus done to. How many people are healthcare?
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask that.
Oh, great. Okay. A lot of you. When we're talking about this, I'll talk a little bit about my position, and then I'm really interested to see how many of you out there also have the same position at your healthcare facilities. So when you start thinking about driving any type of change in an organization, you first want to start with a baseline understanding of the change curve. So as humans, we all go through this in different ways when you're rolling out any type of change, especially when it comes to a technology change. So the first thing you'll experience is denial. No, I'm not going to have to do this. This doesn't affect me. This isn't about me. And then the realization that, oh yes, this is, and I'm going to have to adopt this change. Some of your end users may be nervous. They may be angry. They may not want to let go of that application. Kinds of accessories here. Can you hear me now? How's that, better? Okay, so what happened with Management Symposium is we had everybody come in. You can see the technology being demoed there. It really allowed people to get their hands on it, to work through it with the engineers present and the engagement team present to help reduce some of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that comes with rolling out any type of change. So if you have the opportunity to do this type of forum in your organizations, I'd highly recommend it. I'd also having dedicated employees focused on these efforts. And you'll develop a very strong partnership. I know my role works really closely with Jay and Jim in their roles to make sure that from an engineering perspective, we're talking about how we're then driving the adoption to the end user all the way through. A huge piece of what we do is cultivate change agents, and I've heard that in other breakout sessions that I've been attending. You want to figure out who your key influencers are within your organization. So in healthcare, we're seeing a lot of that informatics role pop up more. It's more and more formalized in organizations now. Those are your people. They're your key influencers. They're the ones that like technology. They want to play with it. They want to interact with it. They want to see it before everybody else. So figure out who they are, put them in an early adopter program, and then allow them to carry your message forward with their peers. It's much more impactful to have someone, to have a fellow nurse say to another nurse, this is really going to change your life, this is going to make it so much easier, than having me say the same thing to that nurse. Same for engineering, same for physicians. So use that peer-to-peer discussion as much as you can, and then repeat whatever you're saying as much as you can. We all know it takes about 7 times for a message to sink in with someone. So the more consistent you can be in what you're saying and use communication collateral, the better. When you start with these large deployments, for us, Wes and I created a presentation, and we'd go around and talk at different meetings to stakeholders and explain what these changes meant to them. We always led with recognizing and acknowledging their issues. So they're struggling with something, we're coming in, we're empathizing, we know you're dealing with this, and we're coming to you with a solution. In our case, it was remote access is difficult, applications and computer workstations aren't consistent across our system. So the solution we made was for a clinical environment, and we made it clear that it would address those issues. Branding is another piece when you think about change adoption. Our Office 365 deployment, we coupled with 2 other technology deployments. One was virtual desktop infrastructure, a VDI solution for our whole 55,000 employee environment, and Follow Me Printing. So we wrapped those 3 things, Follow Me Printing, VDI, and Office 365 together into one initiative that we called My Virtual Workspace. And that's the image with the teal colored circles, and that's the logo we used on every piece of communication, and it's how we talked through the initiative. So we said we're moving to the cloud, you'll now have your desktop available to you in all these different environments, and from an Office 365 perspective, we called out Skype, OneDrive, and Exchange Online as the key benefits to them. We're doing the same with My Mobile Workspace. We're deploying Intune, which Jim will talk to you a little bit about later. But this is how we're branding that deployment. My Mobile Workspace, you'll see this picture. You want your employees to be able to connect back to that and associate it with whatever you've explained to them that it is. The focus on them is really the benefits, what's going to impact them in their daily job. So for us, email, we had a huge problem with email jail. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but we lost a lot of productivity in having people spend time cleaning out their inbox. Wes has run some numbers. You can share them at the end. But we really focused on you'll have more email space. This is an end to email jail, and it really resonated. When we gave our presentations, we always got applause at that point, and people were excited, and they'd say, I want the thing that makes sure we have no more email jail, and that's how they'd refer to it. So that was huge for us. Also with Skype in a healthcare environment, we talked about adding eyes to the conversations that are already occurring by phone. So when you're a patient, you're coming in to an emergency department, say you have a rash, you have something that needs to be looked at right away, you can come into the emergency department, and now with Skype, especially as we work to deploy Skype mobile, you can get a physician on the phone, on their mobile device, on their iPad, and have them look at that rash or whatever the patient's presenting with right away. In this case, it would be a key dermatologist. That's the quickest way to come up with a care plan for the patient. Now, these conversations were already happening, but mostly by phone. What Skype does is add that set of eyes that we didn't have before and makes it available on any device. And then access to any files in any time and place. Again, if you're in healthcare, you know that physicians are very mobile. They want the information whenever they want it, wherever they want it. So OneDrive is a huge benefit to us there. Defining the tool. Curious after the presentation to hear how all of you dealt with this or during the Q&A session. Microsoft has a lot of fantastic collaboration tools, but there's a lot. So I was really interested in hearing at the beginning of Ignite from Satya how they're bringing those collaboration tools together. I think that's going to be great for all of us in describing them to our end users. We have to be really prescriptive about how we want them to use the tools. So use Yammer for this, use Teams for this. They're in a healthcare environment. Their focus is on seeing patients. They don't have time to figure out how to use these tools. So we have to tell them. And I think the collaboration efforts that are going on in Microsoft now will help us improve those. When they look at all those tiles initially, that's a lot. And it can be overwhelming, especially if you're a busy nurse or a busy physician focused on your patients. Developing communication collateral is a key tactic. I'm not telling you anything you don't know that you have to develop the communication, but I wanted you to see the different examples of what we use up here. The point of this slide is really target your audience that you're talking to. So the first picture is a huddle sheet. Nurses aren't in their inbox. They're not opening up Outlook. They don't have time. They're on the floor seeing patients. So they do have a morning huddle or a huddle at the beginning of their shift. So we made a huddle sheet with key bullet points that their managers or directors can take, read off the bullet points, show them screenshots if they want, an actual paper handout that they can print out. That's what worked for them. The second picture, we have an employee app at Sutter Health called Team Sutter. So we put the information there for any employees that use the app. We did a post. That's the middle picture. And then the one on the far side is an actual email. So you still want to generate the email and send it out, but we're finding more and more in the communication space that email is just not a great form of communication. People are overwhelmed by it. They have too much. They miss it. So use whatever communication tool or vehicle you have available to you. It can be the same messaging, but put it in all those different formats. And then give them a place to go. So one site with all the information, this is their one source of truth. If they remember nothing from your presentations, but they have the site bookmarked or they know how to get to the page, that's your key. Keep it all consistent messaging. Make sure they bookmark it. For us, this is an internal SharePoint site on our company's intranet that we refer everyone to. And the last about is enabling self-service training. So we purchased a tool through Brainstorm that's called Quick Help. Does anybody else use it? Yep, okay. I'd love to talk to you after. We have deployed it, and what it does is sit inside every Microsoft application. I've circled it up there under Quick Help. You can go in PowerPoint, Excel. Hey, I have you click the Quick Help, and then it opens up a search box. You can say, how do I do a pivot table? How do I change the font size? How do I use Skype? And it'll bring up a series of videos and FAQs. The videos are short, less than 2 minutes. Or you can have people go to that site and tell them which videos you want to watch. Create a playlist for them. So this is great. We were all very excited about this tool, self-service. We're trying to change that culture a little bit at our company to enable more self-service. But we haven't seen as much use as we'd like. So we're still trying to promote it. But we find that people still want to call. They want a person to walk them through the steps or to sit next to them, help them through it. So hopefully we see an uptick of this moving forward as we work in optimization of our Office 365 tools. And then the end result hopefully for all of you, will be happy end users. This is a picture of several of us on the team with our physicians and informatics colleagues after a big deployment at Sutter-Roseville, one of our hospitals in California. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jay Greenidge, our Director of Engineering, to tell you more about our process.
Thank you, Monica. So good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk about how we got the work done. And not technically, of course. I'm going to leave that to Jim. He's a whole lot smarter than I am. But really about our deployment philosophies and how we brought the teams together so that we could move to the cloud in roughly 30 days. So our deployment philosophy. This is probably one of our most important slides that we have in our technical services organization. This top picture over here tells us how we used to do it. In the past, we felt that we could not deliver a product unless that product was 100% complete. And what that means is our partners were not receiving any value for 6, 12, 18, even 24 months. They need value now. So we changed the way we operate. We also call this slide the skateboard slide. So today, a partner comes up to me and says, Jay, you know what, walking back and forth is just a little too slow. I need to go faster. I go, great, we just engineered a skateboard. Doctor comes back 3 days later and goes, you know, Jay, the skateboard's good. I'm moving faster, but I keep falling off of it. I go, well, we just engineered a fix. Here's some handlebars on it. Now you have a scooter. Doctor comes back months later. He's happy. He's like, Jay, I'm going real fast. I'm not falling off, but I need more speed. We go, great. We just engineered a bike. Then a bike. Then a motorcycle. Then a Ferrari. Incremental bits of value. That's the important thing. Think of it this way. If you spend your entire time engineering MySpace, by the time you're done, everybody's going to be on Facebook. Or the iPod instead of the Zoom. So on-prem to cloud in 30 days with no experience. This is great. The first thing I want to talk about is when you put together your team, you need a collaborative environment. You can have the best team, but if you put them behind their cubicle walls, if you let them interact via email, Skype, IMs, you are going to be slow and inefficient. These teams need to be put together in one room. They need to talk to each other. Heck, they need to fight with each other. You are going to go a lot faster if you work in a collaborative workspace. Next, I mean, everybody understands this. You need top talent for your organization, for your program. But I'm not really talking about technical talent. Yeah, you need technical talent, that's important, but you need people that think differently. You need change agents. You need people that are ready to challenge the status quo. It's a lot of people out there that just kind of like doing it the same way and they're not ready to change. You need to have the right people in your program. Simple, ensure the individuals are relieved of their daily duties. Simpler said than done. We cherry-picked people throughout our organization from different managers. We had to have conversations with each one of those managers saying, if they're going to go into this program, that is the only thing they do. I don't care what breaks. This is their only thing. We have 30 days to get this done. Give the team full autonomy. Any supervisors, managers, directors in here? This one's important. Focus on objectives, not supervision. Let the team take ownership. Let the team be creative. Let the team be innovative. You know, when we first said 30 days, I think they all, well, definitely Nick over here, thought I was crazy. But there was reasons that we had to do it in 30 days. And the team actually turned it into a game, and they beat the game, and we got our first users migrated to the cloud in 30 days. And lastly, the 20-minute blocking rule. The 20-minute blocking rule is a play built out of our daily engagement system that we do every day. Every morning we ask our teams 4 questions. One of the questions is, what is blocking you from doing your work today? Well, we only had 30 days for this project, so we took it up. What is blocking you from doing your work in the next 20 minutes? It could be something as simple as the change control board saying, that's a major change, not a minor change, it takes a week, or just another team that doesn't want to play along. It's our jobs as managers to take these blocking issues, break down those walls so that the team can move forward fast. I can't have them waiting a week to do something if the project needs to be done in 30 days. So the fishbowl concept. Why do we call it the fishbowl concept? I'm going to go back to the first point I said in the last slide, the collaborative work environment. We took the team, we put them in an old office that had a bunch of windows on it, sliding glass doors. They look like a bunch of fish swimming around in there. But this is an actual picture from the fishbowl. And what's so great about this is the team that was put together really had no cloud experience. But the team, alongside of our Microsoft partners, in 2 days, or 2 or 3 days, were able to put this high-level design together. Because you need to do that in the first 2 or 3 days if you're going to be able to do this in 30 days. You'll see the high-level architecture, you'll see our phased deployments, server builds, and most importantly, our calendar of milestones to see if we're going to hit the 30 days. My favorite part is the little asterisk on the bottom in red, user impact. Because it's important to note, you will break things. We did. Why did we break things? Go back to the deployment philosophy, the first slide that I said. We were not going to take 6, 12, 18, 24 months to deploy this. If we did, we probably wouldn't break anything, but there would be no value for 24 months. So what did we focus on? We focused on the important things. We focused on patient care, we focused on security, and we focused on business operations. We were 99.999% sure that we weren't going to break those, and we didn't. But for everything else that we did break, and there was a lot, we had a SWAT team ready to address all of those. Most of the issues, they were solved in under an hour. None of them were considered major, and we were able to move quick. Most importantly, when you do this, especially for the first 3, patient care, security, and business operations, always have a rollback plan for every change you do. We rolled back a lot of changes because we noticed really quickly we broke things. One time we broke mail flow to the internet. Another time we broke a department. Just make sure you have a rollback plan. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and Jim's technically going to tell us how we got it done.
Thank you, Jay. Howdy, folks. So I'm going to try and go over some of our technical details. We only have about 30 minutes or so and leaving room for questions afterwards, so there's not a whole lot of technical detail I can go through, but I'm going to try and hit the highlights, kind of give you a heads up of what we did, what our journey was, and kind of those gotchas so that you don't have to go through those. First idea here is to give you a perspective of what we look like. This would be our day 31 look into the environment. So as we start looking at this skateboard model, this isn't how we necessarily ideally want to implement it, but this is how we did so that we could get up and running fast. And so you see there's a lot of controls. Those of you that aren't from the healthcare environment, I know there's a few of you out there. In healthcare, because of the regulation and stuff, we're a little crazy on security. You'll see a lot of extra security controls in this model. But our first step was to start actually, as we start to evolve the skateboard towards those scooters and bicycles, is to start eliminating redundant controls. And so our first thing off the list here was we took out IronPort, which was doing our anti-spam role. And it was redundant to, in this case, we had Microsoft ATP, or the Exchange ATP controls implemented, along with FireEye system. To give you an idea of what this mail flow looks like, and by the way, this is our current state. This is our current mail flow. It's not what you'd want to go and do for yourselves if you were to do this out of the box. But this is taking an existing environment and going through that migration while keeping our controls in place. And again, focusing on that skateboard approach of this is functional, it works in the environment, mail flow is getting to the people that we need them to, and our security is not compromised at all. As we start moving on, we start looking at removing more redundant controls. The next up, we are targeting FireEye. And as we evolve, we start looking at removing things like Mobile Iron. And as mailboxes are migrated to O365, we'll be switching to Intune and eliminating our on-prem mail flow with the exception of the DLP controls. Eventually, we expect to have all of our systems up into O365. So that we don't have the DLP system coming and routing the mail through the on-prem controls. We expect to leverage the Microsoft DLP systems, and you start simplifying your on-prem environment. The lower areas may eventually evolve too. We don't have that on this diagram, but I know that with the advances that have been announced at Ignite this week, there are some new capabilities where we might actually put our eyes on those too. So next up, I'm going to get into a little bit of our identity and security portion. This is really important because identity and security is really the basis for all of the Office 365 functionality. So first thing to know, we used IDFix. You're going to have to do this. You run that against your Active Directory environment to get you an idea of how bad a shape you're in, your Active Directory. So The important thing here that I want to get across to everybody is we had 85,000 errors identified in our environment by the IDFix tool that were blocking us from syncing our Active Directory to Azure AD. It sounds ridiculously scary and insurmountable, but it actually wasn't that bad. A lot of it is just common errors and a little bit of cleanup, but they're there. Don't be intimidated if you see large numbers. The IDFix auto fix tool for us, there's some intricacies there in the size of our environment that it's just too much magic. We can't have some of the fixes that it actually does automatically. We're just a little bit not what we'd want to do, so we manually fixed a lot of the stuff. Now, by manual, I mean scripting manual, not touching 85,000 people by hand. Next up, ADFS claims. So this touches on the one thing, my little story here, identity clinical kiosks and why we had to abandon the inside corporate network claim. So those of you in the healthcare environment, you're likely to have kiosks or shared machines. What we found was that those folks that were on those shared machines accessing the web applications ran into an issue where if the inside corporate network claim from ADFS comes through, Office 365 lays down a persistent cookie. That persistent cookie establishes the identity of the person that logged in. The next person that comes to that kiosk gets access to the prior person's email address or email data and whatever. So the fix is to go to ADFS and remove that claim so that you no longer have the inside corporate network claim. For us, there wasn't a significant loss in feature set by losing that claim. You'll have to evaluate and make sure there's none for you as well if you do go down this road. The problem is that you're kind of stuck with having to do this because of the kiosks. And AD Connect, watch those upgrades. AD Connect likes to stuff the inside corporate network claim back into ADFS every time it upgrades. So for us, that meant we couldn't go through the automatic upgrade process. And actually, in our environment, the size of the environment doesn't allow us to do auto upgrades of AD Connect. But if you do have AD Connect and you're considering auto upgrades because it sounds nice, it'll stuff that claim back in there, and you're going to be back into a problem with your kiosk machines. Next piece is the issue authorization rules, or issuance authorization rules inside of ADFS. So in here, we had to put some controls under ADFS to restrict some of the protocols. So for us, legacy protocols, we wanted those disabled. And today, there's not a control in place to disable those protocols from outside the network. The reason why that's important to us in healthcare is that there's clients, Touchdown is an example of one that can actually connect to Exchange Online with EWS instead of using standard protocols. Well, we want to make sure that we have managed access to the information that may be in Exchange Online or the other services. And so our solution was to disable those or restrict those so that they could only come from on our network. And then there is a rule in there to allow modern authentication, which is the newer solution that Microsoft's come out with. You'll need that. And that leads you into conditional access and other new capabilities. And speaking of conditional access, so conditional access, I like to think of conditional access is that the best gift that I didn't know I needed. And that is that those gifts you didn't know you needed, but that when you get it, you can't believe that you never had this and you don't know how you could have lived your life without it. That is conditional access. If you're a technical geek, yes, sorry. Those of you not technical geeks, maybe not so excited about it. And for us, the technical geeks, especially in healthcare or probably some of the other industries where you want those protections, conditional access is the thing to look at. It helps you protect your data in ways you couldn't have imagined before. Some things as examples of that are, it gives us the capability to think towards having email access from our Sutter laptops outside of the network without requiring a VPN. But if you're on a personal computer, you wouldn't have that access. Or this is also how we're managing our Intune managed device requirements so that if someone's on a mobile device with Intune, they can get access. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. At the same time, making sure that if they're not on Intune, they don't get access. Conditional access is just getting more and more powerful. If you haven't attended any sessions on that, I highly recommend them. They're worth seeing. Some of the new capabilities that are coming down the line there. And like any other gift that seems like super cool when you open it up and you're not really sure what it is, but you're realizing that you might actually like it a lot, we don't read the directions at first. And so you kind of jump in and start using it, and then you realize after the fact, this is a lot more powerful, but also a lot more complex than you thought. The policy chooser model down there, that flow chart in the lower right, that's kind of to show you guys what we did is that we actually went through, built some policies, and then realized that we got to a point of complexity in our policies that we needed to build a decision tree so that we could figure out what we were protecting and what we weren't protecting just as much. Actually, what we weren't protecting is probably more important because with conditional access, it's not always obvious that you missed a use case that may slip through your system. On to rolling out Office 365. So first up, we were coming from an Office 2007 environment and moving to Office 2013. How many folks here have Exchange 2007 or earlier? Are there any of you out there? None of you. Wow. So, lucky all of you. So, Office 2016 dropped Exchange 2007 support. So for us, we had to make a pit stop, and we're at a pit stop right now as we finish up our migrations. With Exchange 2007, we had to go to Office 2013 in order to kind of move on our environment. So we're making a stop on Exchange Office 2013. When we finish our migrations, we will move on to Office 2016. It's unfortunate for us. I guess it's lucky for all of you. App compatibility and remediation, software inventory, and the Office telemetry tool, using SCCM for inventory, Office telemetry tool. Anything you can do to get a visibility into the environment is important. It helps you identify applications that are out and in use that may need upgrades. In our case, for example, we had WriteFax, and our WriteFax environment was neglected. We needed that upgrade in order to be able to do certain devices out in the environment. Now, again, the telemetry tools give you an idea of how to target those places where that's installed while still moving ahead and not letting the WriteFax upgrade hold up your Office deployments in general. Again, that skateboard approach. We want to keep moving as fast as we can, hit the people that are good targets, and not let ourselves get held up waiting for perfection of the whole environment to be up to date. Outlook. Can't say it enough, use cache exchange mode. We had a lot of debate and back and forth on whether we needed cache exchange mode. It was working fine without sometimes. Some days it wasn't. In the end, ultimately, cache exchange mode, we've decided is an absolute must.
I think that was my brilliant idea.
Yeah, thank you, Wes.
Probably.
We wouldn't have done it without Wes. The other thing, so those of you that, since you probably all get to skip Office 2013, Office 2016 has modern authentication disabled, or Office 2016 has modern authentication enabled by default, so that won't be a problem for you. Office 2013 started before modern auth existed, or was implemented, so you had to go in and manually turn it on in the registry keys. Again, you guys get to skip that. The tenant also, now new tenants have it on by default, so you don't have to worry about the tenant side. But if you're concerned or having some issues, you might check and make sure if you have an older tenant that you go back and turn it on. Click to run versus MSI. This has been a long, ongoing debate for us. On the same machine, you cannot have both suites or styles of delivery installed. And now, you'd think that it wouldn't really matter when we talk about Office, and we didn't really think that it was a big deal until we got around to the ancillary packages like Visio or Microsoft Project, which also succumbed to this, so that if you had Office installed as click-to-run on the Office suite installed as a click-to-run version on a machine, and you want to install Visio, the Visio version also has to be click-to-run if it's in the same version suite. So that kind of stuck us with, once you head down a path on a machine, you need to stick to that path. And it's important to know, we really had a lot of debating and experimentation trying to see if we could get it to work. In the end, Microsoft doesn't support it, and it's not worth trying to make it work. So it's worth noting that for our environment, our approach, standard machines, we use click-to-run. Update mechanisms are different, but it does help us at scale do some pretty easy, consistent. The suite gets updated as a full package rather than individual components. On the clinical kiosks, so we had to resort to MSIs, and the reason for the MSI installs is licensing. So the license activation occurs for click to run is actually a little bit different than the license activation for the MSI process. MSI process does your standard key activation process, so the machine gets kind of lit up and allowed to use Office. But the click to run wants to activate is the individual using the Office suite at the time. And that works okay when an individual signs into a computer and logs into and launches Office so that they get their pass-through authentication and it doesn't seem like a big deal. But when we talk about clinical kiosks, the kiosk accounts are signed in as a generic account, not the individual users. And so we don't want to license our kiosk accounts and pay for Microsoft licensing for kiosks. I'm sure Microsoft wouldn't mind, but we'd prefer to actually license the users. So the solution is put the MSI-based installs on the kiosk. That way the kiosk is license activated and your users can come in and use that Office suite without issue. Office 365 web applications. So I talked about that Inside Corporate Network ADFS claim. That fixes the persistent login problem. You'll need to do that. Make sure that you're testing and validating that you don't have a problem switching between users on kiosks. The next fun thing was how we tricked Windows integrated authentication. And this is a mouthful, and this is a great tidbit for all of you having to deal with the kiosks. So there's not a great way to have pass-through authentication disabled on a kiosk out of the box. So what that means is that when, in our case, the nurses or physicians walk up to a kiosk machine and they launch Internet Explorer and go to Office Outlook web app, it tries to do pass-through authentication. Integrated Auth tries to be helpful, tries to do pass-through authentication, and signs in as the kiosk user. Well, that's not what they were trying to do, so somehow you've got to figure out how to disable that. This is the hints at how you can go about accomplishing that task. And so the first thing we did, strangely enough, is we used IE Enterprise Mode, which is available in Internet Explorer 11. We forced, via Enterprise Mode, the ADFS logon URL to render in IE7 mode. This downplays what ADFS thinks the browser is that's coming to the sign-in page. We then went into ADFS and configured that so that it did not allow integrated authentication from Internet Explorer 7 or lower. So we, in turn, get this forms-based authentication whenever an whenever IE on a kiosk hits ADFS, they're always prompted with forms authentication. Now, Chrome, you don't have to worry about this because Chrome, unless you've configured it to, Chrome doesn't by default do integrated authentication. So this is really generally around an Internet Explorer problem. If you have configured Chrome for integrated auth, good luck. I don't have the solution for that right now. So the next thing we did is created Imprivata templates for that forms auth, noting that the ADFS logon page comes in. We want to help those users, so when they walk into the kiosk, we have Imprivata deployed. The machine knows, or Imprivata knows the person that's at that machine, and so Imprivata is playing those credentials to speed their access in. So we get that sort of benefit of being like integrated auth by having Imprivata play the credentials in so that the clinicians aren't having to type in their username and password every time. And as a bonus hack, we added the auto-assigning or auto-appending of the domain name to the username in ADFS. There's a JavaScript you can edit in ADFS, and then that way people can use the short name that they're often used to doing, is just typing short name. Also, Imprivata likes to type the short name in, and then it adds the domain name for UPN-based logon into ADFS. Lastly, clean up your cookies. You do not want to have those cookies floating around. This is, in a sense, a secondary protection to the Inside Corporate Network claim. I like using both of them because if one or the other fail, we've got an extra protection. But really, this is about clearing the history, temporary internet files, and cookies on those machines so that when that person closes Internet Explorer, the next person coming into it doesn't accidentally get access to some data that they weren't supposed to get. Next up, talk through some of our implementations and phases that we're doing. Migration, so Skype for Business. So for us, the first things we did was environmental readiness of the Skype for Business environment. Again, kind of like Exchange 2007, our environment was a little bit neglected. We went from OCS, upgraded to Link, then upgraded the Link on-prem servers to Skype for Business, and then moved over to, started migrating our users to Skype Online. Our phase 1 migration was targeted towards IM and presence. Those are the easy ones because they aren't generally heavy users, but they do need that, and they're great for migrating up to Skype Online. We've got, I think we're at about 35,000 people that are in that state. Next up is PSTN conferencing. So these are the folks that have to do scheduled meetings and need a dial-in. We're in the process of starting those migrations and activating the licenses for that. Next up, our phase 2 migration is really talking about people that are using the voice functionality out of Skype for dial-in or phone capability. And on our futures, we're looking at PSTN calling, which seems to make a lot of sense when we start talking about emergency or DR type efforts. Imagine a hurricane here, an earthquake in California, where we're from. If you needed phone services, and with Cloud PBX, they'd be routing the phone through our on-prem data center. But with PSTN calling, those individuals would be leveraging Microsoft services, which means that they potentially, if they can get phone service, would be going through Microsoft's phone system rather than ours. So we're thinking that there's an opportunity there. Next up is OneDrive. We have, initially in our phase 1, we did our Office 365 apps, made availability basically of OneDrive to be able to be accessed from Intune managed devices, internal sharing, and Office 365 apps. We did not implement File Explorer because of the synchronization. For us, that My Virtual Workspace implementation that Monica talked about earlier, that's a non-persistent VDI environment, and syncing is very bad in a non-persistent world because it syncs every single time you log in. So we're looking forward to the Fall Creators Update with the Files on Demand, which should give us then that ability to have File Explorer level integration that people are used to poking around and finding their files, and not have the risk of having a terabyte of data synchronized every time someone comes along and logs in. Next up is external content sharing. We really want to get to where we could share content externally. We need, some of the DLP controls aren't quite where we want them to be. Those are coming. And so as soon as those are there where we want to see them, then we'll start looking at adding the ability for sharing DLP-based content out externally. And then our phase 4 is we really want to get out of home drives and migrate to OneDrive. And we think we'll tackle that after we get the data sharing capabilities. Next up, Intune. So we're converting from MobileIron. I'm sure there's a few of you out there in the audience that are using MobileIron. So we had to do coexistence with MobileIron via an ADFS rule. The ADFS rule permitted active sync from the specific MobileIron Sentries on-prem. We don't have the cloud version of MobileIron. We have the on-prem. And so we were able to poke holes for the MobileIron system to connect the active sync in ADFS. We are paying for our prior sins, and what that means is that a lot of our devices managed in MobileIron weren't necessarily done very well. We've been on it for a long time, so prior to Apple DEP, we didn't have great controls. We're kind of doing our migration a little slower than I'd like as we start to try and fix those devices and getting them actually properly managed into Intune. We are doing MAM plus MDM. The MAM portion is allowing us to put copy and paste controls around those services that we're putting on the device, while the MDM today is giving us that conditional access hook to provide those access on those devices while they're not on our network. Now on to mailbox migration and Office deployment. So I'm going to step through kind of how we've gone about our mailbox migrations. This slide, I will break into each of these individual pieces, but this is to give you kind of a heads up of overview of what's going on. And there'll be a little box, the bouncing ball in the lower right corner gives you kind of an idea of where I was in that versus that picture initially. So first up, environmental readiness. We stood up Exchange 2013. Again, for our Exchange 2007 environment, we were forced into some hard decisions to try and get compatibility with the Office 365 communication. And so Exchange 2013 is our bridge to Office 365. We used SCCM to figure out where Office clients were deployed and the telemetry add-in. Both those I kind of talked about a little earlier. And then for the mailboxes that aren't using the Outlook client, it's a lot of log surfing, trying to find those folks and figure out whose mailboxes you might be impacting or making sure that people are actually using mail. And then the applications that are using alternate protocols or these legacy protocols, such as EWS, MAPI, IMAP, and finding those server-based applications so that you know what are they doing, what is their impact in the environment, what does it mean to migrate them, or can I migrate them easily up to those mailboxes up to Office 365. Done with versus done to. So this ties back to Monica's portion of the presentation where we really tried to get this to where we weren't actively doing things without at least giving people the opportunity to kind of volunteer, create a lot of excitement and energy, enthusiasm around people wanting to come and get onto this system. You're looking for those folks that really are early adopters because they can spread good word. We're very careful about choosing those folks so that they are, especially in the very beginning, so that they're not having a bad experience. They're willing to be on their skateboards and aren't worried about skinning their knees. So we use SharePoint surveys to allow people to opt in and opt out. We did pilot groups and updated those clients with the newer version of Office. Now, I should say that the done with versus done to, it's not an end state. At some point, there are people that you're going to have to do it to them rather than expect them to come to you. The idea here, though, is to get enough energy and enthusiasm around it so that you can convince those major voices in the organization to start selling it for you. Moving on to assigning licenses. This is one of those steps that were easier in some ways, but it's an important and critical piece. You figure out who those people are, when they're ready for migrations, and you assign the licenses to them. And the migrations themselves. So once we had all this pre-work done, is we started actually moving on to the migrations. Now, with the size of our environment, when we talk 70,000 plus mailboxes, again, that's no way you would ever want to do that by hand. So the engineers over here figured out how to automate that and put a lot of time and energy into getting down good automation routines. That's paid out for us because we could then take groups and migrate those groups. And so what we did is they broke them into migration batches. And as we look at these batches, this will give you an idea of how we did, is we've got our group one, which is we'll call them the easy mailboxes. Mailboxes with no dependencies. They're just great for moving up. Now, the timelines there that you see up at the top and bottom, those are really not tied to the groups per se. We started with the tens, moved on to hundreds and thousands. It's really more, those are more over time versus the individual groups. So that by the time we're hitting group 3, we're moving thousands of users per week, but that's scooping up group 1 as we got more confidence and group 2 into that last phase. And so we keep getting faster and faster, kind of a snowball effect. The group 2 stuff, department mailboxes and calendars, this is really just kind of getting those resources that have a little bit broader impact that aren't those disconnected user scenarios. And then that group 3, these are the spider webs where we have to move large groups of people potentially as they have delegates tied to other delegates, tied to other delegates. We had one admin in IT who had a delegates, we'll call it a delegate spider web of 2,500 people, so that when we moved her mailbox, we actually had to move a giant group of 2,500 mailboxes together. Post-migration steps. So once migrated, we move on to configuring those little things that are important, litigation hold, so that we have retention, the active sync policies, shared mailbox permissions, et cetera. And just to finish off here on my section, so it's really about the hard work now for better work later. There's a lot of hard work that goes into this. It's a major team effort. There's a lot of components that build into this. But in the end, we feel like it'll be better work later. We get to focus on, hopefully, the more fun stuff, and migrations are just not that. But it pays out in the end. And with that, we're actually open up for Q&A. Yep. I'll hand it out back off to Wes.
So, and I think the Microsoft people have some BlackBerry Pis that we're going to, Raspberry, not BlackBerry. It's real Raspberry Pis in the box. You eat them, Raspberry Pis, for good Q&A stuff. So if you have a Q&A, They've also asked that we go up to the mics because we're recording this session. They want to get the question on there. But before you do questions, I want to tell you how proud I am of this team and the team down here. From first mailbox, or from contract signed to first mailbox, 27 days. From contract signed to all but 4,000 of those really hard mailboxes moved, mostly the ones related with SunQuest, because they won't play. From first mailbox to all but that hard ones, a year and a half. And at the same time, they deployed My Virtual Workspace, that other product that you heard, to 10 hospitals. So it helps when you have the talent of this caliber on your team. But thank you very much. Now, we can go with our first question. I will immediately shun it off to somebody who actually knows an answer.
So organizationally, your organizational makeup with security versus information systems, are they together? How'd you get security to buy off on a lot of these concepts, given your history of breaches and things like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was through a lot of partnership, done with instead of done to. Initially, when I first got to Sutter, our DSO, we call it DSO, Data Security Office, was part of IS. We broke that out. The audit, compliance, all those people are over in legal. And then we do the operational security. But what we did, I sent Jim and their chief information security architect to Redmond to look at the flight plan, the security flight plan, and they spent 2 days, him and the chief information security officer, going over the controls that we have in Azure. And they, coming out of that session, they were more enthusiastic about the direction we were going than we were. So I would highly recommend that. Get them off, get them separate, let them focus and talk to each other. Tark.
I'm assuming you guys chose to migrate the data, not to Greenfield where these are all clean.
Right.
So, Extract 500 addresses. Did you guys have a migration tool? How did you guys address the Extract 500 address issue? Did you have any issues with that, first of all? Do you plan for it? Do you have a
X500 migration?
So let me state the issue I faced with my previous migration. This is one Exchange organization from a second Exchange organization. The Extract 500 addresses have the references to the current organization, right? The email addresses. So when you copy them from one organization to another, the email Extract 500s have reference to the organization that they were part of. When you go to the new organization, you do a reply. The new organization has no clue what that Extract 500 is. It fails the email addresses. Previously, we used Quest. Quest had a tool. They don't have that tool anymore.
We use Cornerstone is what we use, right?
So, well, no, so you're tied back to the AD Sync tool.
Oh, AD Sync.
So we're single domain, single forest, and a single, well, more or less a single exchange org, I guess you could say. So the AD Sync tool was really took care of that for us, I think is kind of the answer. And I'm looking over at Pete, who...
Pete, right here, you can come and talk to him later, too, on it.
Okay, I'll come by and talk to you.
Yeah.
If I can ask one more question, public folders, did you guys?
Public folders. We still use them.
You still use them?
Yeah.
Even on Office 365, you just okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over the mail proxy account. It was in part of our migration step, so we're using that right now.
Okay.
Eventually, we'll have to move them up.
Okay.
So for the crowd that can't hear, public folders are on-prem. We're using the mail proxy account to do that.
And
We'll
this is a licensing question. Shared mailboxes, I'm hearing conflicting answers. Do you pay for the license for shared mailboxes, or you don't pay for the license for shared?
We don't.
Yeah, it depends on if they send and receive an email and they act as an email agent themselves, then you need a license. But if it's just a shared mailbox
Just
internal
like
or something like that,
Okay.
then you don't need a license.
There's a license that connects to it. So if you've got a licensed user, they can send as that shared mailbox.
Yeah.
If it's an interactive logon, then you pay for the license.
AD
Yeah.
account for that shared mailbox can't be used.
Okay.
And
So-
Pete will tell you.
Great.
So
Thank you.
it depends on the features you want to light up on the mailbox. If you're just using the mailbox to store mail basically in it, there's no license required.
Okay.
If you're turning on things like legal hold, which is a major requirement for us to be able to do like compliance searches and stuff like that, you need to be able to flip that on
we'll
on
take
the
one from
individual
over there now.
mailboxes. That need it.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Over on that side.
You got
Hi, John Sedell, University of Michigan Medical Center. So this is something that we've been dealing with and kind of prolonging it, moving it to 2016. But I think you guys were in a situation where
We had
2007, you had to make a move
we had
or
to,
do something.
we got forced. Yeah.
Right. And so that's the question I really have is how do I get the conversation started with my leadership? And then also we use Ironport too. So what's the return on investment and some of the email encryption challenges that you had to deal with? And also, I guess it's multi-part. I have a lot of questions, but but the other piece of it is, oh, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
But anyways, so what is your return on investment once you've migrated and you dumped Ironport? Are you also a hybrid? And are you concerned about bringing the data back? And then if you have closed networks like your operating rooms that don't have the ability to get out, and today if you're on-prem, you know, they're using OWAD access.
Yeah.
How did you deal with some of those challenges as well?
I'll take the first
And then do
part.
you tier your employees? Do you tier your staff?
No, we made that decision not to do that.
Okay.
Just from a complication factor. I didn't want half our clinical it would be clinical partners. Didn't want half of them on an OWA kind of experience when everybody else was on a full app. So we just we worked with Microsoft, yeah, and got the whole enchilada for everybody. I've got an ROI sheet. Send a card or send me an email, wes.wright@sutterhealth.org, and I'll get it to you. But what we did was when we were doing the roadmap, the flight plan, is okay. Here's all the offerings at Microsoft. Here's what we're paying for. Which ones can we take out, and what's it going to save us? Our biggest savings came in storage, frankly, because we move everything. All of our on-prem file storage goes up there. But we are Ironport, FireEye, and several other security tools. We get to get rid of those. So I think my 5-year ROI was something like $5 million only. But we were in a backed up situation. We either had to pay a whole bunch of money to get a 2013 on-prem environment stood up, or we could just take the next step and go to the cloud, not knowing I had to have a bridge 2013. So that's why we did that.
And one of the things that we did too is, you know, we tested it all. We ran everything through ATP first, then into Ironport to make sure that it was catching everything, and we were great. So, I mean, that just told us right there that we were ready to move.
Oh, and by the way, on the Windows 10, the Windows 10 Defender side, we tested all the antivirus stuff too. Windows 10 Defender shines. So if you're running something else and you're going to run Windows 10 with the Defender, probably the best one out there.
Right. So if you don't mind if I get your contact information.
Yeah, you got
we
it.
can talk a little bit later.
Yep.
And do some comparison.
I think it's on here too.
It's in the Microsoft Ignite app.
Yeah, we went E4 across our environment, which puts us in an odd place right now because there is no more E4. So most of our stuff went down to E3, but some stuff we still get in E5. We plan on moving at least to the EMS E5 version. Don't know about the whole Office suite because that's kind of pricey, but EMS for sure. Sir.
Mark White, Adventist Health, not too far from you. But 2 questions regarding your intranet. Did you say you were on premise? So your user base is actually on premise. So do you have an external user case where you have users, say your physicians, coming in on offline to your off premise?
Yeah, that's what we'll do with Intune with the managed browser.
Okay. Let me say, go further, is we probably have 3 different things that fit into that model. So Intune for mobile devices. My virtual workspace we have accessible, so that's our VDI environment is accessible remotely for them, so if they want to publish desktop. And then while we don't have it today in large rollout, is the conditional access for domain joined devices to allow a laptop that travels outside the network to gain access to those services without VPN.
Okay, that answers my last one. Thank you.
Thanks. This side, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Your side. I didn't even say. Thank you for saying something.
Am I up?
Yeah, your turn, man.
All right. A couple disclosures. I got here a little bit late, and I came in when you were talking about your Office licensing, MSI versus
Oh, you
Click
messed
to
the
Run.
first part then.
I did.
Oh,
sorry.
I was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And other disclosure, I work with the school system, so our licenses are
cheap.
They're free.
Yes, yes.
So with licensing,
Who wouldn't like to have a .edu pricing here, huh?
we wanted to completely do away with MSIs, and we looked into the Click to Run, and we licensed our devices with Click to Run as well for things like student computers and our kiosk machines. So it was Is there some sort of a cost difference why you chose to still do the MSI versus the click-to-run device activation?
The O365 license includes the ability to do either. So
It wasn't a cost decision. It was a
activation issue.
Yeah, it was our clinical kiosks. We can operate different than our virtual environment. So on all the other environments, we license the user, right?
Everything's user licensed. So even our clinical kiosk, we license those nurses or physicians that access that machine.
Right.
It's just that the license check, the way the MSI version does, it's the key activation model versus the click to run is a kind of a real time. The user that's signed into the desktop is the one that does that license check.
We use that with the SCCM. SCCM deploys that click to run, and then as soon as the computer comes online, it activates the license in Office 365.
Which works great on anything except for a kiosk.
Okay.
Because the kiosk is a shared account. It's a common account that anybody hitting that machine, if you and I walk up to the same machine, the kiosk account is what's logged in to Windows, not your or my account. And so we don't want to activate and license the kiosk account. We're using the MSI because the people using Office, because the kiosk isn't the people.
I think we're misunderstanding because the device actually shows up as _device and then the device name in Office 365. The license is actually applied to the device, not any user account whatsoever.
So we have thousands of devices, more than people, for every patient room we're examining. So it would cost us a lot more to license all those devices.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why.
Okay.
Middle.
Okay, I don't know where to start, but
Okay. I'm ready.
How many do you migrate up through Fast Track a day?
We don't use Fast Track.
You do not. How
No.
many do you migrate yourself a day?
We were hitting, what was our biggest total?
So
Marcus?
our max was 10,000.
10,000, okay, because we're doing 80,000 mailboxes.
Yeah.
And right now I'm around 36,500. We're using Fast Track 500 a day, and then we also do anywhere between 100 and 250 a day manual. So those are the volunteers that we're constantly getting that we're pushing up that way. Service accounts. How did you guys handle service accounts?
So that was a lot of the log scraping work. We needed to see how those service accounts were interacting with the mailbox, because based on how they were accessing the mailbox data, you may need a license on that service account.
Not meaning that, how did you associate them? Because we're trying to find who all's that's a pressure point for us, trying to always clean up the service accounts and making sure we're getting the service accounts migrated.
We ran into the same problem.
Okay.
And basically what we did is look for common keywords in the account. We looked at things like ownership, stuff like that, if there was DLs or anything associated to the service account, to try to find conversation points to have with teams and stuff like that.
Is everything that you're using going through ExpressRoute?
So, yeah, it is a great question.
We have everything going through ExpressRoute.
So we've gone back and forth, actually. And the latest place we're in is not leveraging ExpressRoute.
For our Office stuff.
Office traffic, yeah.
All our other traffic goes ExpressRoute.
The Azure traffic is ExpressRoute. We've had it to where the Office traffic went over ExpressRoute. We've gone back and forth. I think in the end, what we're starting to look at is a distributed internet model for our organization rather than having a centralized internet. And once you start embracing that, ExpressRoute, leveraging the Office traffic through ExpressRoute doesn't make sense because you'll be leveraging all those internet.
And we don't call ours a spider web. Ours is a hairball because it's about 20,000. That's how big ours is.
We've called it other things too, by the way.
Because that's where I'm trying to wrap my head. How do we get those 20,000 people up?
That's the hard one.
And a word of caution, Microsoft does throttle. So if you're going
Yeah,
to set
I
the
know.
number of people you do migrate per night,
Give them a call.
you can work with Microsoft to increase it or remove that number.
Oh, okay, never thought of that.
Yeah, thank you. And we have our problem now with all of our Skype users. We've overrun our tenant and Skype migration. Sir.
Real quick, actually.
Oh, Nick's got one. Yep.
Real quick. So the service accounts, the way we are identifying those, it's hard. If they're not configured correctly, not documented correctly, you don't really know what is doing what. We're actually scraping the CAS logs and looking for IP ranges that are in our data centers. Most of our service accounts are coming out of that data center and not at the client access points.
We have so many hospitals in so many locations. That's what makes ours so difficult, ranging all the way through Pennsylvania, elsewhere, so it makes it really difficult for us.
But if you know where your server subnets are, is what Nick is suggesting, you might be able to leverage that through against the logs to then identify, at least like it's in a way to increase your confidence and find those
Did I do
hits.
that one? Okay. Sir?
So aside from your kiosks, do you have hot desk users as well?
Yeah.
And did you implement shared activation for them? Or did you make those users deactivate devices themselves?
So we have shared activations everywhere.
Okay.
So yeah, we went with shared activation even on the regular PCs. And so
Okay,
it's
fair
for the click to runs, shared activation, the kiosk, it's MSI.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Have you hit any problems with shared activation, hitting like limits or anything like that?
No, surprisingly not, because we were really paranoid about that.
Yeah.
We had a lot of dialogue with Microsoft, and in the end, they tried to reassure us that it'd be okay, and we haven't seen an issue at all, even with the quantity of users and rotating through.
Okay, fantastic. Cheers.
Thank you.
First of all, thanks for the insightful session.
Oh, sure.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah.
I mean, my question is more on the support and how your organization now looks like when it comes to IT support. I understand that it makes all the sense to get, good people under a roof and get things implemented. But now the implementation is done. So how are things aligned towards your IT? How are you driving your day-to-day IT? How does your operations look like? Was there any change when you moved from on-prem to cloud? So what does it really look like from a people manager who's supporting multiple teams?
Yeah, our organization, I run the technical services department. There's another applications department. Within technical services, we've moved to a plan, build, run service line organization. So Dave Maldonado is our director of our collaboration service line. And everything that has to do with collaboration, which all the Office 365 stuff is collaboration, runs from what we call the left, him as the service line director, all the way through the plan, build, operations, and data center, and desktop over on this side of the line. So he has people in each functional that are responsible for his service line. As far as the team that Jay stood up, we've still got that going because I still got another 18 hospitals to put my virtual workspace in. So that's still a scrum room more than anything. So that's kind of the way we're at now, and I think maybe you can give his.
As you move from managing an on-prem infrastructure to the cloud,
Huh?
so a lot of it had to do with training.
Oh.
So training different groups on how to now manage something that's in the cloud. So our account management team, it provisions new accounts, our help desk people, it's all about getting out in front of them and teaching them the new way to do a lot of this work as well. So we haven't reduced any headcount just because we moved to the cloud, which is what everyone's fearful of. But we are doing things really different. So you have to prepare for that and plan for that.
Yeah, we're finally just able to use some of those on-prem human resources for innovation because we're taking this day-to-day. I mean, your Exchange administrator was probably one of your best technical persons on your team. They're still the best technical person on your team. Now you can have them focus on cool stuff instead of running email.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done.
Rolling out the rest of the O365
Right,
suite.
like rolling out the rest of the O365 suite. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sir.
Hi. Regarding OneDrive, I heard you guys are planning to migrate, start using it for home drives.
Yes.
How do you guys plan on addressing like the privacy concerns, storage space, backup, like for all these users?
They got unlimited space in OneDrive, and we've got backups in OneDrive, so I don't.
So by default, it's unlimited?
Excuse me?
It's unlimited space by default for OneDrive? Part of
It's
it?
unlimited. It's the
Yeah,
term Microsoft.
it's unlimited online. I think your online's like 50 gigs, and then you got unlimited archive, so I don't have to worry about space anymore.
So like from a
And
cost perspective, it's going to be the same no matter what, or is it actually going to be based on the usage? If you're trying to figure out the cost for the storage space, I mean, by default,
it's part of our Office 365 license.
Okay.
So with our E4 that we got, that came unlimited OneDrive storage for every one of our users and 500 megs of SharePoint for every one of our users. So we have virtually unlimited file space in in Office 365, so I don't have to worry about it too much. And we'll have DLP up there. We have the digital rights management up there. We're going to build an app to, if people want to share PHI, we'll use a Power App and build it and have it send off to the right data governance people. So I think we got it covered once Creators comes along, because we can't sync up.
So that DLP part, that's part of the Creators?
No. DLP, there's a DLP engine within OneDrive right now that you can use, that we use. And it's not the same engine as Exchange Online for some reason. So it works differently, and it doesn't work. There's like a 2 or 3 minute lag right now, so we can't really use it strong. Marcus?
A lot of features that were announced during this we're going to be taking advantage of. Today we're not able to share externally just because the controls aren't to the level that we would like. However, the cloud secure gate, what was it?
CASB.
Yeah, so that has hooks where we can actually hook into our on-prem semantic DLP so that we can actually apply our own on-prem rules through the API hook and actually apply labels to stuff that's in our OneDrive. So that gives us an additional layer of control now. We're almost at the point where we feel confident when we know where all of our data is. And
okay. I've just been notified by Monica with the shoes that we only have room for a couple more questions, but this whole group of guys will be out in the hall. They're the real technical dudes who did it, so we'll take another. Hey, remember to fill out your survey. Give $5 to hurricane relief, okay? Sir.
First, great session. You guys really did a great job sharing all your information.
Oh, thank you.
I noticed
I was particularly good. Yeah.
You were great. You're great. I noticed in, I think, your final view, no hybrid servers. How are you comfortable removing your hybrid servers? Because that's scuttling your bridges, scuttling your boats. There's no coming back.
Remember, we're putting 40,000 My Virtual Workspace that rely on a network connection or everything goes bad, so we're not as risk adverse as some.
Well, it wasn't that as much as that horseshoe in your pocket for acquisitions, mergers. Without the hybrid server on-prem, once you get rid of it, it's gone. And so leaving one behind, at least for me, is something I just,
Maybe
am
we'll
defending.
think about it a little bit.
I don't need high availability. I don't need DR. I just need that one hybrid server still attached to my environment. So I was wondering how you got the confidence to at least now maybe go rethink it, but it showed that you were getting rid of it.
Yeah, we hadn't dealt with an acquisition problem, so that would probably be the only case that I can see.
That's the one I'm keeping it for.
Yeah, that's a good point. We may have to rethink that.
You
Thank
guys
you.
are great. Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Yeah, top tip.
We don't know everything, right?
Yep.
So did you guys have any on-premise email archives
Yes.
systems that you had
That's
to
what
migrate?
we used Cornerstone, and it was the
EAS.
bane of my existence.
So we probably have about, I want
Hey,
to say
Dave.
40 terabytes of. Yeah, so we were an EAS shop, CapEx now. Probably 30 to 40 terabytes of archived email, and that's compressed with single instance store. We're expecting that to be maybe 90 terabytes once we rehydrate that data. So we leveraged a product called Transvault that was able to extract that data straight into the user's online archive. Not easy and not fast, but it was the way to get it out. Now we still have journal mailboxes that we need to deal with, and we're still trying to figure out if we're going to restore those back to on-prem and look for another e-discovery solution. So still figuring out that piece.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Did you mention that you have litigation hold on for your entire environment?
Yeah, we do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no organizational on-off switch for that currently, right?
Correct. You got to flip it on after migration
So
per
are you having
mailbox.
challenges with that, making sure that everyone gets that on provision?
We have a series of processes that'll go through the environment and just triple check everything to make
Right.
sure it ran.
And I don't know if you have time for this, but going back to the ADFS claims thing.
You know what? We're getting the high sign. We
Yeah.
need to let the next group in. But we'll be right outside the hall. We really appreciate your
Come
time. We're
join
happy
us.
to spend more time.
Thank you, everybody.